The National Institute of Health is funding a study which is looking at the impact of giving cross-gender hormones to gender dysphoric children who are as young as 8 years old. 8 years old. These children will bypass their normal puberty and be pushed into having the puberty of the opposite gender. It's not even the puberty. I don't even know what you call it. Their body is going to be pushed into presenting characteristics of the opposite gender. We have no idea what the actual physical impact or long-term complications of doing something like this might be. The National Institute of Health is funding this study to look at the mental health impacts of doing this. The problem is, children who have gender dysphoria often have gender dysphoria because of underlying conditions. There are a number of reasons that we know cause gender dysphoria. We have a number of people who have transitioned, who have recently desisted and started talking about their experience. And there are people like me who experienced gender dysphoria as a child and did everything I could to present as the opposite gender, and my gender dysphoria resolved. So now our government is funding studies to look at children as young as 8 years old being given hormones of the opposite sex in order to push their body to look more like the opposite sex, because these doctors believe, I don't think they believe it. I think these doctors are realizing that they will benefit if society thinks that it is possible for somebody to be born in the wrong body. I don't think the doctors believe it. These doctors have gone to medical school. They know that it's not possible to be born into the wrong body, that that kind of supposition is meaningless. However, endocrinologists are embracing this because if somebody transitions, medically transitions at a young age, that person becomes a lifelong patient. The drug companies like it because that person will be purchasing cross-gender hormones for the rest of their lives. Most 8-year-olds still want to believe in Santa Claus. They still have magical thinking. They still don't understand that the gender stereotypes that we have, or the gender roles that we have, or the way we are conforming or non-conforming to traditional gender roles does not dictate our gender. They are very susceptible to peer pressure. They're susceptible to social influences, which might say that being a homosexual isn't okay, or if you are perhaps a more masculine girl, that that's not okay, a more feminine boy, that that's not okay. These kids are incredibly susceptible to suggestion. So if somebody says to them, you know, that's you're acting like a boy, and it's a girl, that girl might just think she is a boy. Gender dysphoria is something that we don't know much about. It's been a very political issue, and transgender activists have been able to bully healthcare providers and psychiatrists and therapists into accepting the idea that being transgender is a normal presentation, that we shouldn't be concerned about it as a mental health issue. The only issue is that people who are born in the wrong body feel like they're in the wrong body, and that's the problem, not the fact that they feel like they're in the wrong body, that they are in the wrong body. Now, how convoluted is that? And for us to tell children that they are born in the wrong body, and a lot of these children are actually being coached. So they tell their therapist or they tell their doctor that they're suicidal because they've been told by transgender activists that if they tell their healthcare providers they're suicidal, they're more likely to get the services they want or their parents want. Can you imagine? Can you even imagine a parent telling a child to tell a healthcare provider that they're suicidal in order to get cross-gender hormones? As someone who experienced gender dysphoria, I get it. I also get the fact that when I was a little kid, about 8 years old, that my gender dysphoria was not caused by me being born in the wrong body. And if I had been alive today, it's possible somebody would have suggested putting me on cross-gender hormones. We don't even know what cross-gender hormones do, especially when they're given to a child who hasn't even undergone normal puberty. We also know that the vast majority of children who are gender dysphoric, if allowed to progress naturally through puberty, end up resolving their gender dysphoria without any intervention at all. These are kids who don't need to be medicalized, who don't need to be transitioned, who are not going to present with gender dysphoria as adults. So we're medicalizing this. Children as young, girls as young as 13 are having double mastectomies because they believe that they are born in the wrong body and that they're boys. 13 years old, and they're having double mastectomies. One of the things we know about cross-gender hormones is it can cause the gonads to atrophy. So boys who take cross-gender hormones end up having their testicles and their penises atrophy, and it can become really painful. Their penises actually become feminized, and it becomes incredibly painful when they have an erection. Girls who are on cross-gender hormones, who start taking testosterone, their uterus starts to deteriorate, and it can become very painful. And generally, they need to have hysterectomies. So we are putting children as young as 8 years old on cross-gender hormones that cause their bodies, their functional body parts, to atrophy. And somehow, we are thinking this is okay. And with legislation that's being passed, such as the Equality Act that is currently being proposed in Congress, a lot of legislation that talks about affirming a gender dysphoric child, all of this is pushing children towards medical transitioning. It's suggesting that the appropriate response to a gender dysphoric child is to transition them, first socially and then medically. It's based upon fear-mongering by the trans community. They tell parents that if a child is not allowed to transition, that child will kill themselves. That's emotional blackmail, and it's also incorrect. Children who are not allowed to transition most of the time will move through puberty and their gender dysphoria will be resolved. I would suggest that those children who have gender dysphoria, if they are provided with appropriate counseling services that teach them how to be more comfortable in their body, how to resolve the conflict that they have, that rate of resolution of gender dysphoria would go up to darn near 100%. Instead, we're encouraging children to have dysfunctional feelings, to feel anxious and uncomfortable in their bodies, and to believe that they've born in the wrong body. And now we're funding research so that children as young as 8 years old can be medically transitioned, so that their bodies can be permanently deformed, permanently rendered dysfunctional. These children will never be able to go through a normal, natural puberty. These children will be sterile. These children will have untold complications and side effects for the rest of their lives. There's no rationale for this kind of research because most children will resolve their gender dysphoria if allowed to progress naturally. And this is something the transgender movement is trying to suppress, this information. They're trying to say that if a child is gender dysphoric, they're transgender, and they will kill themselves unless they're allowed to transition. This is a lie. There's no way to say it any other way. That's a lie. If you tell a child that they're likely to kill themselves, that they're not allowed to transition, they're more likely to kill themselves. So this kind of information, saying these kinds of things are not helpful in any way to anybody. They're promoting mental dysfunction and poor mental health and poor physical outcomes. These children their bodies will never be functional. We're promoting dysfunctional bodies, we're promoting dysfunctional ways of thinking. And even though something like the Equality Act, it sounds wonderful, we're going to give equal rights to everybody, they don't understand that something like the Equality Act could put parents in jeopardy of losing their children if parents don't agree to medically transition gender dysphoric children. Children can be taken away from their parents if they don't affirm a child who is gender dysphoric, because some cities and some states now are considering that child abuse. They're considering a parent who does not affirm delusional beliefs of a child to be a neglectful, abusive parent. And this will be codified if the Equality Act is passed. So I believe in equal protection under law for everybody. I do not believe that we should affirm delusions. I do not believe that we should promote dysfunctional thought. I do not believe that we should promote the I don't even know what you call it. You're making a child who is beautiful and functional dysfunctional. We don't even know what it's going to do to these children. This is not equality. We are using these children as guinea pigs. Trans activists who are telling parents that if they don't affirm their gender dysphoric child, that child will kill themselves. I don't even have words for the kind of damage that does, for the kind of damage lying to parents in that way, that kind of emotional blackmail. That's a horrible thing to tell any parent ever. I can't even imagine how transgender activists can sleep at night knowing that they're promulgating this kind of myth, when most, up to 90% of children with gender dysphoria, some studies even say 98% of children with gender dysphoria will resolve that gender dysphoria and end up being functional, happy, non-transgender adults. Okay? So we need to get this information out there, because most people just follow what's in the news and they think, oh, somebody's born in the wrong body. Of course, we want to be nice to that person. But it's not nice to encourage parents to do something that they're uncomfortable with because they're worried their child is going to kill themselves. And it's absurd to say that to any parent. There's just no excuse for it. It's a lie. And it's also really important that we don't tell children that they can be born in the wrong body, because children are magical thinkers, and that's a scary thought, to be thinking that you could be born in the wrong body. There's just no way that this narrative is helpful. And a lot of transgender activists suggest that women like me are radical feminists, and that's also a lie. I never considered myself a feminist. I always considered myself someone who fought hard for equality for everyone, equal opportunity, not equal outcome. I just want everybody to have the same basic civil rights. And what the Equality Act does is it actually undermines parents' right to be parents. So a doctor who is uncomfortable providing cross-gender hormones to a child could get in trouble if the Equality Act is passed, because they would be considered discriminating against a transgendered person. So the Equality Act will take away rights of therapists, rights of healthcare providers, rights of parents. This isn't good for families. This isn't good for parents. This is not good for children.